Flexibility of translanguaging. Although we described one form in which translanguaging might be embedded in classrooms, we need to keep in mind that this whole concept of translanguaging embeddedness in the curriculum is very dynamic and it is pretty flexible. So over here, we have to keep in mind that we are not talking about simple code switching. In simple code switching, you would do it without thinking, but we are doing it through a well thought out process. That is one thing that makes it different. Secondly, what we are doing is that we are normalizing, legitimizing bilingual practices as they happen in wider society, but we take them to another level in the classroom, and in the classroom we make the learners functional in both the languages in such a way that they are able to use either of the language for whichever function they would like to assign them. This is simply because, as we talked about the needs for the 21st century, this is because in this world, we need to be careful with the fast pace of changes, with the new employment opportunities opening up, with the opportunities of communicating with diverse communities across the world, with the opportunities to align our political and democratic interests with a community that might be like miles and miles away from us. We need to be able to use the languages that we know flexibly. Because if we just do code switching in classrooms, we are not doing much, because this is what they do in the wider socio-cultural context also. But when we come to the academic context, we need to take bilingualism to another level. So at times we might, for instance, use any language for productive or receptive purposes. When we say productive purposes, please remember this would mean something that the learners do actually in action in terms of writing skills, in terms of writing or speaking. These are known as productive skills. And they can also be assigned a new language for what we call receptive skills, that is for listening and for reading. The main difference between receptive and productive skills is that productive skills are more visible to the person, to other people, while receptive skills are only visible or somehow mentally visible to the person engaged in them. So when we say listening, it does not mean that the learner is only receiving certain messages and he or she is not processing it. And when we say reading, it does not mean that the learner is actually doing nothing, but just capturing the images on the text that are coming to them. But we only call them receptive because this means that anybody watching them cannot see the action as such unless the person engaged in it tells you about it. So we are talking about translanguaging. We are talking about the flexibility within translanguaging. So any type of two languages or multiple languages can also be used concurrently and alternated during the course of a lesson. Different variations are possible, and we choose them on the basis of the organizational goals, learner needs, the cognitive demands of the learners on the one end, and the academic needs on the other. So if the child is not yet at a specific level of language proficiency, but the child has actually to move up within that weaker language to take up an exam at the end of the school, then that transition or alternation of these languages will be changed as the child improves his or her proficiency in that language, so that the child is able to take the academic exam or the academic goal of the organization and of the individual are also fulfilled. So we do not want to cripple an individual and somehow not teach the majority language, but we use the minority language to restore the prestige and the self-esteem of a community and enabling them to function well in the minority language as well, along with the majority language. So when we think about this translanguaging arrangement, what should we do? We need to think about the goals, short-term goals, immediate learning needs, and long-term goals. Both have to keep in mind. That means there is a flexibility about how we go about it at different levels within schools, within same subjects also. So we need to decide the destination before we try to find a way to it. That is, once you step out of the house, for instance, where would you go unless you don't know where you want to arrive? So the question is, where do you want your learners to arrive? And then you use the languages, give them the tools to arrive there. So no single right answer as to what type of arrangement in terms of translanguaging we can use. It only depends, again, on the context and on the learners you are dealing with.